Hey everyone, quick heads up for this week's story. My guest and I discuss sexual abuse and the grooming of minors fairly extensively, so if you are uncomfortable with those topics, please consider skipping this week's episode. That being said, I think it was a really, really wonderful and important conversation, so I'd love for you to listen. I think there's a lot of insight shared, and even I learned a ton today, and I'm very thankful for that. So that being said, please enjoy this week's story. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Yours, a storytelling podcast with me, your host, Trey Everett. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Tell Me Yours. I'm your host, Trey Everett. Today on the pod I have a great friend, a really brilliant artist, a poet, a singer-songwriter. She does everything and she does it all extremely well. She is here today with a difficult but really important story. Again, I know I had the warning at the beginning of the episode, but we do discuss grooming and sexual abuse at pretty significant length. So again, if that's going to trigger you in certain ways, please consider skipping this week's episode. But again, I think it's a really important conversation. I'm so thankful to my guests that we had it. I learned so much from this conversation, even just in terms of being an ally and how to spot red flags, things of that nature. Please welcome to the pod, Kat Hamilton.
You still hear me?
I can still hear you, yes.
Wonderful. And there's like a little picture of me looking cute.
You look great, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I'm wearing like the world's most confusing outfit because that's what happens when I just like leave the house for something.
I feel like that's partly you though, too. You know what I mean?
It's a very confusing look. There's some pink bike shorts. There's a blue button-down cutoff long sleeve. There's some Vans with like these weird ass socks.
Brilliant.
Because I ran out of the house being like, oh my God, my interview.
I love it. That is so good. Thanks for doing this. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Thank you, Kat, for being vulnerable and transparent and just willing to talk about this issue.
You and I know. I feel like you and I could shoot the shit for like 24 hours.
Yeah, we could talk forever. But
are experiencing something like this, please seek help. I have some resources in the show notes of this episode. And Kat even offered to be a resource herself. If you want to follow Kat, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you listen to music, just look up Kat Hamilton. Her songs are awesome, and she's an incredible artist. Follow her along on Instagram at Kat Hamilton Official. And if you want some extra time with Kat, head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/tellmeyours. I love Kat. She's wonderful to talk to. We had a great time chatting, so you get some extra time with her there.
So grateful that you're.
If you want to follow us, Twitter and Instagram, we are at Tell Me Yours Pod.
And I'll probably have questions, but if anything,
thank you again so much for listening.
But if I do
especially to this week's story, again, thank you, Kat. It was so wonderful to connect and chat. Until next week, be kind to each other, and we'll talk soon.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I'm good. I mean, here's the thing. When you hit me up, like, tell a story, this was the thing that came to the forefront of my mind because lately, I don't know whether it's because I turned 30, but it's crept into a lot of my music. It's crept into a lot of my poetry.
Interesting.
I've been working on a lot of therapy.
Yeah.
And so it's really been at the front of my mind. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it before I decided to tell this story on your podcast. Because I was like, this is the story I want to tell, but I feel like I need to put some consideration into one, how to tell it, and two, like I wanted to update my parents and stuff. I wanted to stay communicative because this is okay. Anywho, so I'm just gonna pterodactyl scream really quick.
I love it. Yeah.
No, but so first off, content warning, trigger warning, grooming, sexual assaults, sexual abuse. Like, let's put that out there. Yeah. If that upsets you, if you can't hear about that stuff, I get it. And also just skip my story.
Yeah, join us next week for
Yeah.
A story
I
that's
hope that the
surely
next
about
story
farting in
is like,
public. Yeah.
yeah, I hope the next story is like somebody like shit their pants at their graduation party. You know?
I will ensure that it is.
Yeah. Like it better be. I shit my pants at my
Yeah.
graduation party. All right, so I'm a survivor. And it took me a really long time to come to terms with what happened because
Mhm.
it's kind of cinematic. And I think the movies and TV talk a lot about it. It's very much like used as a trope.
Hmm.
So I was in a secret relationship with a teacher, and I was 17 and the teacher was 35.
Hmm.
The line is so far from crossed. It's like,
Yeah.
I guess I started talking about it more because one, it was really nice to start realizing that other people had similar experiences. And two, it's portrayed a lot on TV and movies. And I think in a way, because people think it doesn't actually happen in real life. It's always like, someone on One Tree Hill is doing it with their teacher. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very like Pretty Little Liars, and like they use it for a plot because it's fantastical and they think it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But it happens more than you think it does. It happened to me. And if I'm being a little like comical about it, I largely cope with trauma and pain through humor. It's what I've always done.
Totally. I think that's like
my vibe.
Super like natural for a lot of people to deal with trauma that way.
I find that I do need to find humor in it because things about it are ridiculous. Things about it are cartoonish in the way it happened, and the way I felt at the time and the way I feel now as someone who's much closer in age to the perpetrator than I am to myself as the victim.
Yeah.
When you realize that like someone did something that like, and you're an adult now and you're like, I would never fucking do that.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, this is not the same.
What?
Not the same thing, but I often think about that way about my parents. When you're a kid and you're growing up and you almost like deify your parents, but then like, I mean, at my age, my parents had 3 kids. Like they had 3 children together by the time they were my age, and I'm like, holy shit! Like I think in this way, it's like, man, I have so much more respect for my parents as people, as individuals. But yeah, I think that perspective, shift changes a lot about how we look about a lot of things. Yeah, totally.
Almost cartoonish because like your parents have 3 kids and you just figured out that Florida is actually Florida like yesterday.
Yes. Yeah. I personally knew that a long time ago, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
It took me way too long.
How did you not know that? It's in the name.
I'm like, oh yeah, Florida.
It's one
and
word.
Then like everyone's like, yeah, like Florida. I'm like, what?
Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like one of my most embarrassing facts about myself, I think.
Oh, that is brilliant.
It is embarrassing. But anyway, so let's go back to the beginning. So when I was in 6th grade, I got my first guitar, and my parents put me in guitar lessons, like you do. And the person that they put me in guitar lessons with was this like 28 or 29-year-old touring guitar player, and he had like long shaggy hair and kind of looked indie rock.
Yeah.
And some preface, I have always been kind of a weirdo. I know everyone says that, but like there's a difference between saying it and then it actually being like 100% true.
Yeah, totally.
Like I was a little 30-year-old at like 5. I wanted to sit at the adults table. I had trouble connecting to my peers, really hard time connecting to my peers. I often didn't feel like the activities that were age appropriate. Like I didn't do team sports. I had trouble. I left ballet because I kicked some girl before the performance. I just didn't connect with much. I felt really isolated because my peers just cared about different things than I did. And music I found pretty early on and fell in love with it pretty early on. And that was like kind of the thing, that was the only extracurricular I kept. Like I was in Girl Scouts for a hot minute, but then I made Izzy Bronstein's streak at Girl Scout camp and I got in trouble and everyone agreed it was best that I left the Girl Scouts.
Oh no.
I know, poor Izzy. Hopefully she's all right. I can't imagine how hard that was to get caught naked at Girl Scout camp.
Yeah.
But so I was just different in a lot of ways. Like when I was 9, I told my mom I was going to run away and join the Moulin Rouge. I don't think I had a concept of what that entailed. But
Yeah.
I think groomers really look for kids and teenagers who are like that.
Yeah.
Who are already isolated from their peers.
For sure.
You know,
for sure.
And I try not to lump everyone together, but like I do think that's a quality that made me a good target for that kind of thing. And so I entered my guitar lessons, and at the time I was already listening to alternative rock music, indie rock music. I had lots of fantasies about being those people, being the indie rock musicians and going on the road and having these stories. And I had this big old fantasy about moving to New York and playing CBGB, which is hilarious to think about now because CBGB is a relic. But, I had a lot of fantasy around it. I was already very interested in music and writing songs. And my parents had noticed that I connected with that. And I was a goth. I was a Hot Topic goth at the time. Or maybe I was just starting my Hot Topic goth journey, you know? Because it's definitely incremental. You start a little bit and then it just gets more and more intense.
Absolutely.
But so I started with a guitar teacher who, for all intents and purposes, was a cool, attractive, older guy. I mean, seriously older. I'm 11 and he's 29. 28. But he was everything I wanted to be, and I think that's really confusing, you know, because like I had just so stars in my eyes. And so we were in lessons together from 11 to 17, so like 6 years. Guitar lessons almost every week, and I had a little crush on him for most of it.
For sure.
You know, and now I identify differently, and my queerness is a large part of who I am, and I was seeing him every week for guitar, and I was writing songs, and he was giving me feedback on my songs. So for like a 6-year period, I have this person in my life who's only attractive and has the life I want, but tells me, helps me write songs and gives me feedback. And guitar lessons ended up more like a mentorship in a lot of ways. Like, I don't think we learned much about guitar, especially now that I teach guitar lessons, you know, and when I reflect back on it, I'm like, wow, I learned so little guitar, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like crazy to think about 6 years of my life going to lessons for an instrument, and I'm not like the most incredible guitarist that I can be.
For sure.
I'm not like, you know, a shredder. I'm not this insane jazz head. I'm just like a deeply average guitar player. And it's largely because of that, because, you know, the teacher is largely responsible, especially in like a private teaching setting, for keeping you focused and teaching you in a way that moves the momentum forward in your learning in bite-sized chunks. And I don't remember at what point I stopped learning, but I did. You know, like there was no longer that momentum.
Yeah.
And now as a teacher, that's a red flag, because that means the teacher doesn't care about your learning. And we would hang out, and we had so much in common. It's so weird to say it now, like how much in common can you really have as an 8th grader? But you know, like it felt that way. He felt like one of the most important pillars of my life in this like oasis away from the feelings I felt of like being isolated from my peers, being unwanted. I was bullied. You know, this was the heyday of the IM chat room bullying.
Yes.
Where you like come home and like everyone's like, die. And like you have like 100 messages on your desktop. Sorry to laugh about it. It's not funny, but it's funny to me because it's cartoonishly evil.
Yes.
That we had this medium
and
where people can send you this.
Absolutely. And like because you and I are similar. I'm a little bit older than you, but you and I are similar enough in age where like that's an experience that like I am obviously very familiar with as well. And the other side of how comical it is how fucking common it was. Now it's like universally recognized as like horrific and fucking inappropriate, but back then it was like a Tuesday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like you come home on a Tuesday and a bunch of teenage girls are like, I think you're ugly, you should shave your head, you're disgusting, you smell like
so
farts.
Wild.
Like it's so wild now. But you know, I had that. It was gothish. I listened to different music, which is like, I only listened to different music, I think, because I already felt other. And so I leaned into it real hard.
Yeah, that makes total
sense. Boys weren't interested in me, which as a teenage girl, girls can tell you there's a large power ranking in the girls who boys are interested in and the girls who boys are not interested in.
Yeah, interesting.
I've written a lot about it in my poetry, which like a lot of poems I've yet to show people around the boy's interest in you is a large part of who you are. And so I didn't have that. And this all sets me up for what's to come. So it's very important that you know more about me, because I don't know if you can know how it all lined up without knowing who I was as a young person and
that
adolescent.
context is important for sure.
And also, like, one of the reasons I'm sharing the story is because it happens a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
And it happens usually to people who show all the signs that I showed. Isolation, otherness, a lack of people, like a lack of friendships, a lack of people having romantic interest in you at a time in which that's really valuable and like a commodity, peer pressure, bullying. This all can help isolate someone and make them the perfect person to have this kind of stuff happen to you.
For sure.
So it was like a 6-year-long relationship that was like, it felt like a friendship to me, but it felt like almost like this place I would run away to be with someone who understood me. And he would go on tours and tell me all these fantastical stories. And, you know, over the years, I've had to kind of unpack all of that. So let's fast forward a little. When I was 16 or maybe even 15, the dynamic shifted. And it was just no longer about guitar anymore. Like, I'd say we'd talk for most of our lesson, just telling stories, chatting. There was this bond that had developed where like we weren't even he wasn't even trying to teach me a chord anymore, you know? And I started music projects with my friends, and I would show him what we were working on. And I was playing shows around my town as like a singer-songwriter. You know, when you reflect back on it, it's so sad because I just really needed someone who valued the things I valued in my life. And I didn't have that. And there was a person who kind of could see that.
Yeah, and would offer that validation.
Which I so desperately wanted.
Yeah.
You know, and at the time, it also coincides with me having crushes on people and starting to feel sexual feelings.
Yeah.
Not necessarily towards him. I mean, there was a crush there for as long as I can remember.
For sure.
But the desire to have romances.
Yeah.
As the way it naturally does. And so I dated a little, but largely faced rejection because boys my age, and granted, this was before a lot of my queer identity came out, because like now all the fucking 13-year-olds are like, I'm a lesbian, I'm non-binary, but like we didn't have that.
We did
We'd
not
Ellen
have
DeGeneres.
that. Yeah, we did not have that. Yeah.
And so like, what was I gonna do? Like, I'm a goth chick, and like the only like representation of what maybe is queer is like Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, absolutely.
So like we got to put that into context. Like the world has changed really fast.
Yeah.
And so boy approval was a big part of what I wanted. And the kind of boys I felt myself attracted towards were the kinds I saw in magazines like Spin and Rolling Stone, like in bands. You know, like I met Nick Zinner from the IAS one time in a clothing store when I was 15, and I started crying because I was so in love with him.
Yeah.
And like he's like a wiry skeleton hanging on a front porch looking dude.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's Halloween all year.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
That's like such an accurate description of that.
He's like just sunken eyes.
So funny.
You know, and he's like,
Halloween
what's this?
all year,
What's this?
And I was into it.
Yeah, that's exactly how it felt.
I love that. That's so funny. Yeah.
You know, my taste was pretty clear because all the rock bands and I listened to a lot of Green Day and Good Charlotte before that. And the relationship definitely started changing when I started blossoming into more of maybe someone who looked more womanly, but also somebody who had more of those desires.
Totally.
And wanted not just for boys to see me in terms of how it impacted social situations, but like wanted boys to like me. And like I was fucking weird. I wrote this whole album about one guy, and I feel like I can say it now. His name was Kevin Curlin, and like we met up many years later, and I admitted this to him. I wrote a whole album about him, and then I handed it to him. I like recorded in GarageBand, gave him the album, and I said, can you check out some of my songs? I really value your opinion. And I was like 15.
Oh,
isn't that cute? But like
it's
so
actually
creepy.
honestly really cute. I actually don't think that that's creepy. I think that's really cute. I can see why it would be weird for a 15-year-old boy to get that and then put the pieces together.
He was 17.
Okay, but still,
But still, and like, I had a big ass crush on him, and he was a drummer, of course.
Yeah.
Like, I think about that now, and I'm just like the perfect candidate for a guy like person who I will not name on this podcast.
For sure.
To get close to at that time. And whether his actions were conscious, I don't know if he's the twirly mustache villain, but I'm sure he noticed that like I wanted to be seen by people who represented my interests and represented where I wanted to go in life.
Yeah, totally.
There's a reason I wrote a whole album about one guy who I'd spoken like 10 words to.
Yeah.
Like, and in a way, I'm like, that's so cool. Like, I can't believe I did that, but also like, how creepy. And I did a lot of that stuff. I had like big crushes on people, big fantasy crushes, and I would spend all night in my room writing songs about them or journaling with like one candle burning, maybe like a mix CD that has like Hoobastank the Reason on it.
Yes, I know.
And you keep
I
like
know
going
exactly what you're referring
and then
to.
like Elliott Smith, Angelus, and like
gosh.
and so the relationship developed into like a camaraderie outside of music teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you think about it, it's really messed up because my parents were paying him for this service, and at some point it transitioned into no longer being that service.
Yeah.
And like that's really fucking crazy.
Yeah.
To take that money for what I was being given, which was a friendship, but like that's not what he's here to do. He's here to teach me guitar.
Totally.
And it's good to be friendly. It's good to have like a good dynamic with your students, but you have to remember what you're there to do. Fast forward a little later, so around 16, I started feeling a difference, but I thought I was going crazy because how could a guy his age with his life who could have any girl he wanted be interested in me? So I would never bring it up, but I felt something different happening. I just thought I was literally like making it up. I even like would tell some of my friends, I'm like, I have like a big crush on my private music teacher, but like, and I feel like kind of crazy. Like we've been talking so much and I feel so connected to him, but like, how could he ever see anything in me kind of thing?
Totally. Yeah.
And that's around the time that I could continue to feel things escalate. He started asking questions about my personal life, not in a sexual way. He wanted to know what my dating life was like, which is batshit crazy when I think about it.
Yeah.
At the time it didn't feel crazy, but now I look back on it and I'm like, I would never ask. Like there's occasion where someone I teach who's a kid will say, my boyfriend broke up with me last week. I would never solicit that information.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
That's really fucking weird and gross.
I think it's important to have space where the child feels comfortable to be themselves and to share, but the idea that an adult would like actively seek that level of personal information is like fucking wild.
It is wild. And even it would even be wild like if it were just like your older friend's kid that you hang out with sometimes when you're all together. Yeah. You want someone to feel comfortable, but that's the first like real red flag.
Yeah.
You build this long time relationship, and when they start to be of an age that's appropriate for the person who's grooming for whatever A, B, and C reason, they start asking more personal questions.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, like that dynamic shifts. Like there is a very aware and present shift in the I guess relationship is the only term that comes to mind.
No, and there is a relationship there because like 6 years is a long fucking time.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a serious long con. And who knows how much of it was intentional, how much of it's unconscious and subconscious. I don't want to make assumptions about that because ultimately like I don't like thinking that there's like a way in which I came in at like 11, 12 years old and was already like being groomed
for sure
in this very intentional way.
For sure.
Maybe that's naive of me, but I really like to not think of it that way. I like to think of it as something that developed from one state into another so that like I don't have to, There's only so much gross I can handle.
Yes.
As somebody went through it. At some point, I noticed that I was lying to my parents about what I was doing in my lessons.
Interesting.
Red flag number 2. And nothing was happening in the lessons that was perverted, but they would ask me, what was I working on?
Yeah.
And I'd have to lie because I wasn't working on anything anymore.
Mm.
I would say the last 2 years I was in lessons with him, we weren't working on anything. I would show him a song, but we'd mostly hang out and listen to music together, talk about what we liked, talk about our lives. And he had a girlfriend at the time who I'd met a couple times. And I think that so much of this had to line up a certain way because I felt it shift, but he had a girlfriend, and how could he ever be interested in me?
Totally.
This beautiful girlfriend. And so around when my 17th birthday, which is junior year in high school, because I was on the older side of the cusp of when you get entered into a grade. So I turned 17 towards the beginning of junior year.
Mm-hmm.
That's when things really changed. So I was showing him some music. It had felt for a while that something was different, but I was not very experienced. So around those 2 years, I started drinking with people. I made friends with the drama kids, and we would drink together. And that's when my experience would happen. So most of my first experiences physically were intimacy wise, were drunk. Like I said, I wasn't getting asked out. A lot of my relationships were born in fantasy and largely existed in my journal. And when I got drunk, things would happen. But, I wanted that closeness. And I realized when I was drunk, people were giving it to me. I didn't ask questions to myself about why.
Yeah.
What changed? You learn about that later, about why that shifts. Why,
yeah, totally.
But anyways, so I'd had a camp boyfriend who to this day is my favorite boyfriend I've ever had. And he knows that. I don't consider myself to be someone who will have boyfriends ever again, because that's not where my orientation exists. Yeah. You've met my partner, definitely not a boyfriend.
Lovely, but definitely not a boyfriend. Yeah.
No, but so my camp boyfriend, still to this day, where we stay in touch in a way, on social media. Wonderful, wonderful guy. At 16, that was my first, other than a boyfriend I had for a month my freshman year of high school, who was a long-haired emo kid, and we were together for a month, and we dressed up as Jack and Sally for Halloween. It was really funny, but
great costumes.
Yeah, so on the nose is broken, but I had a camp boyfriend who was my age, or I think he was a little younger than me. I was 16, mm-hmm. He was almost 16. And the camp I went to was in Boston, and it was a pre-college camp at the college I ended up going to, Berklee College of Music. So it was this amazing vacation from my life. But so far in my life, people weren't interested in dating me. If I left my life and went to Boston, they were. If I was drunk, they were. But I had a really hard time with that. And so around my 17th birthday, maybe a little bit, give or take a few months, my private music teacher and I were listening to a song that was actually about a older man having feelings for a underage woman. And that's when he told me that he had feelings for me. So he was 35 and I was 17, which is a pretty sizable age gap.
Yeah.
And he basically was like, are you showing me this song because of us and what we are? And I was like, what us? Because of course I have little fantasies, but my God, you never think that it would actually, that's the world in which fantasy steps into reality. Mm-hmm. We talked and he was like, I know I shouldn't have these feelings for you, but I do. And I was like, I have feelings for you too, but I've just never thought you would be interested in me. Because it's a crime.
Yeah. Because it's also fucking literally a fucking illegal. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's super damn illegal.
Yeah, fucking obviously, yeah, because it's a fucking crime.
Yeah. But at the time it's because I'm this, because I'm that, and the following lessons after he shared his feelings with me were us discussing our feelings for each other and basically what we were going to do about them.
Yeah. And
I had some real feelings. I mean, when I look back on it, they're as real as they could be.
Totally. But
also a large amount of it is the intense, flattering nature of someone like that having feelings for me. Mm-hmm. When you're an adult, even if you have a large age gap, if you're 20 and someone's 28, you know the difference between someone being into someone because you're into who they are and being into someone because they're into you.
Yes.
You know the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there isn't this weirdness that exists where they know so much more than you do. And I just didn't know that much because I was in high school.
Yeah.
And he had been around the world and slept with probably, I don't know, 60 people and had a life. And so I think that like it's really hard because we have to make sure in society that we, and I'd love this to be something that people talk about in sex ed, that we let people who are, teens, we really help them understand the difference between attraction and like your insecurities piloting the ride, because that's where it goes really wrong. Like,
yeah.
I wasn't attracted to a 35-year-old man. I was insecure about myself, and his attraction felt good. That's a really big difference.
Yeah.
And like what I love, someone told me this a while back, like there's this quote of like, my interest in him was age appropriate. His interest in me was not.
Oh, interesting.
And that's what I think of a lot. Like when I think about the difference, because if I had been 22 and him 35, it'd be gross a little bit, like, bleh. But it would have been dating.
Yeah, totally.
It would have been dating.
Totally.
But it couldn't be dating because only one of us was having a normal experience.
Yeah.
I was having the normal experience
100%.
of being attracted to someone based on their interest in me, based on the characteristics they represented. They were not having a normal experience. Yeah. They were having a problem related to whatever fucked up shit they had going on.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing. And so I really think about that a lot. And I talk a lot about it a lot in therapy.
Yeah, that's like such an interesting observation. And just hearing, I mean, because like obviously I've never heard that before. I've never thought about it that way before, but like it feels like it hits it on the nose so well. Of like you were having an age appropriate experience, they were not.
Exactly. And so, when people talk about 10 years apart, we got to get really clear with the fact that age ain't nothing but a number when both people are having an age appropriate experience with each other.
Yes. Yeah.
And like if you're 30 and someone's 40, your dating relationship is age appropriate for both of you. Mm-hmm. Even 20 and 30, like, maybe the 30-year-old should put some more thought into why they're attracted to someone who's in such a different place in life.
Yes.
But their attraction to them itself is not inappropriate.
I also think it has a lot to do with like the pretense of how this relationship began. Like there was a very clear power dynamic and power structure in the inception of this relationship. And I think that has a lot to do with it as well. Because I think even though if it's a 30 and 20-year-old, if that's how the relationship starts, to me, like even then, it's like that's still kind of a little inappropriate of like, hey, you were in a very clear power dynamic over this person. And like, yeah, I don't know. Like I obviously like I have not experienced it. So my opinion on it is essentially moot, but you know what I mean? Like
totally.
It has a lot to do with that to me as well.
And I think power dynamics are, as someone who's experienced many different sides of them, because this, spoiler alert, this relationship will not be the first time in my life that some fucky shit happened. But I do largely credit a lot of the fucky shit that happened to me from this relationship as setting a standard for what I would accept. And so, with power dynamics, I think it's really important also to say that like there are lots of different kinds and not all hold the same weight.
Totally.
If I were in college and he was my college professor, different power dynamic level.
Fair. Super fair.
And different consequences, like if he was my manager at a restaurant and I were 25, different power dynamic level, different consequences.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think people should be having conversations about it. I think there should be more and more knowledge. The most important part of the story is that he had these feelings and didn't change his behavior and remove himself from the situation. I didn't see a need to remove myself from the situation because that was an age appropriate thing for me to see the situation as.
Yeah, totally.
But he really has, and hopefully he thinks about it now. He's not in jail or anything. I hope he thinks about it now that the real thing I wish he had done is just removed himself before it could begin.
Yeah.
Whenever these feelings started, he should have put me in with another teacher.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that there's a level of transparency about this is what this person should have done.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
But if it's a kid and an adult, he just needs to go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go the fuck away.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, whatever money he was making off of me as a student was definitely not worth the risks he was taking with whatever he was feeling.
Yes.
And I'm sure lots of people would hear that and go, like, I can't believe you're being so fucking nice. But like, I think in a way, like, for me to understand the situation, I do have to separate the human from the monster. Because that's the only way I'm going to be able to learn certain things from it. And forgive myself for certain ways that I was like, a large part of it is you end up trying to forgive yourself because you did this and said that, and well, it wasn't all him. That feeling. And you know, like, it was a high. It was a total high. So as the spring came of my 17th year, wow, I sound so like old timey. Okay. So in that spring, things moved into a dating relationship. So like, it went from like conversations around feelings to an affair of sorts. You know, I don't know how it lines up with him getting out of that relationship with his girlfriend. You know, it's very possible he still had the girlfriend. Who fucking knows?
Yeah, totally.
I didn't ask questions. Not about that, at least. I was just feeling lucky to be seen.
Yeah.
And it kept me from asking a lot of important questions. And so it started into a dating relationship, and we were still doing lessons, and he was still getting paid for a little bit of that. But, you know, there wasn't all the sex stuff, but there was some sex stuff. You know, I was a virgin, so I hadn't experienced that before. That, like, I had done other things. For sure. Also drunk when doing them. But I hadn't had that experience. And, you know, we started dating, I guess. I would come over to his apartment and hang out. I would lie to my parents, say I was with my friends, lie to my friends, say I was with my parents. Because for him, he doesn't have to lie to anyone. There isn't this, like, when you're a teenager, you are accountable to so many people because your parents need to know why you're not home.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're with your friends, but you're not actually with your friends. So you have to lie to them too. And I had my driver's license at the time. So I would drive over to his apartment and we would have dates and talk and hook up and whatever. And we one time had the world's weirdest date where we went to the outdoor shopping mall and just like walked around the Pottery Barn.
Okay.
Which, I guess, what do you do when you're like a fucking old ass guy dating a teenage girl?
Yeah.
Like, there's not much you can do together. So you're like walking around Barnes and Noble.
That's terrible.
And like having book fights. I don't think that people do that, but like, we would like throw books at each other in like a cute way.
Yeah, it's just like, oh man, it's just like, I don't mean to, like, again, I know we've said it over and over again. We don't mean to make light of the situation. It's just so fucking juvenile. So again, exactly. the idea of that date is something I did in high school. Like, I went to Barnes and Noble with my high school girlfriend and we threw books at each other. Like, because that's what fucking kids do. Like,
you walk
that's
around
okay
the Pottery
to do
Barn.
When you're a kid. It's not okay to do that
me,
when you're when you're fucking closer to 40 years old. Like, oh my God.
Isn't that crazy?
It makes me so angry. Yeah.
I know. I get angry about it too.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you did all this shit. You could have gone to jail just to walk around Pottery Barn with me and like pretend we owned a couch.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how crazy is that? You know, and that was like the dates we would go. If we went in public, you know, no kissing, obviously no holding hands, but like, we couldn't go to the movies together.
Even just
we couldn't have dinner together.
Even just the idea that you knew that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we can't.
Exactly. Like,
we cannot show affection in public because, yeah. Oh man. Ugh.
You know, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's wild. It genuinely is wild.
It's genuinely wild. So like, what are you gonna do? So you walk around Barnes and Noble throwing books at each other, and you walk around Pottery Barn and drinking Starbucks coffee, and
again, as a child, you're able to rationalize that as like fun and normal because for a child that is fun and normal.
You know, I didn't have a lot of stuff to go on as to what teens did together when they dated.
Yeah, totally.
What did we, you know, where do we hang out, kind of thing. You know, I'd been on a date to the movies once, but me and the person who should not be named couldn't go to the movies because that would look fucking weird.
Yeah.
And people would think he was like my dad or something.
Yeah.
Or my uncle taking me to the movies. Like, it's just, and that was too much of a risk.
Yeah.
You could run into people you know, and you'd be at the movie together. At least if you're at Barnes and Noble and you run into someone you know, you could like separate.
Oh my God.
Or be like, we just ran into each other. Isn't that just bonkers?
It's just like, yeah. I mean, it's all like the moral of the story, but like, it's just like, yeah, just to put, yeah. I mean, honestly, yeah. It's fucking bonkers. Yeah.
And that's, I think, why I reflect on it with humor, because in some ways these things are very cartoonish. What happened to me?
Yeah.
There's no subtlety in it. This wasn't like a subtle, like a lot of, I'm not gonna like, all grooming should be taken seriously.
100%.
But there are lots of different levels to what that looks like. And I experienced a very extreme one, one where the boundaries were really clear, where it was against the fucking law in every way. And like,
at some level, you were both aware of how wrong it was.
Oh yeah, we had conversations about it all the time.
Yeah.
Because unless you're in his apartment, you're outside having to navigate. You need a cover story. There's so much lying involved in this situation.
Oh man, yeah.
Really normalized secrets and lying for me in a way that I wish it hadn't.
Yeah.
Because that colors my entire adulthood.
For sure.
Secret keeping ended up becoming one of my main skills in life. It got me in a lot of trouble, largely because of this man. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that I didn't have experiences before him that color my adult dating life. We all formed those very early on.
Totally. But yeah, to your point, it's different.
It's different. So anyways, things escalated from the more like innocent Barnes and Noble book fights to more and more intense situations in his apartment, sexual situations. We had a very clear, and it's so weird now because I'm queer and sex can be defined in so many ways.
Yeah.
And so the boundaries that he thought were like getting him out of trouble, like aren't really boundaries in my world. Like we did so much sex stuff. We didn't do the main event because like, in a way, like I think that the legality of it put this like firm boundary there. So everything else was A-okay.
Yeah.
Everything else was not A-okay.
Oh man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it further isolated me from experiences because like spring of your junior year of high school, that's such a time in which you're starting to feel around for identity.
Yeah.
You're starting to hang out with different people because you're starting to form your own opinions on humans and not just going with who you knew in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
You're forming interests. You're getting ready to apply to colleges. There's this idea of what's next. And so we had a lot of conversations about where can this go?
Mm-hmm.
Because where can it go? And so I was lying to everybody, spending a lot of time at that apartment, crossing a lot of boundaries, having a lot of experiences that I couldn't tell anyone about because I couldn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because some of these were like my first experiences and I couldn't tell anyone. It started escalating, I think, to a point where he started getting panicked because as you navigate that dynamic, you will start to see all the ways it's like not sustainable.
Yeah.
Like he was going on tour and calling me after shows from like in secret. And that's like really insane to think about him like making up excuses to go call his teenage girlfriend from like Omaha.
Yeah.
So then I went to my prom and I called him from my prom. I was like, I miss you. I wish you were here. And of course he can't fucking be there. That would be crazy.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think about it's so surreal because I think about like, what would it, like, I'm like, you seriously talk to your like teenage girl on her prom night? Like, and I'm not experiencing prom because I'm missing someone who can't go with me. And like, it's this real soup of fantasy. And I could tell that I was losing patience with the lying. Like he was ramping up anxiety over getting caught. I was losing patience with lying about everything I was doing to everyone in my life.
Yeah.
And like things physically had escalated as well, which let's take the disgusting shit off the table. It just sucks to be a teenager having all these first experiences and not being able to just like tell your girlfriends about it.
Yeah.
And they're talking about their experiences. That's a time in life in which all your friends are like, oh my God, like we did this and it felt like this. And you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I just kept feeling more and more on the outside of life because this huge part of my life I couldn't share with anyone. And when things started escalating more physically, I told him that we needed to stop it being guitar lessons. I was like, I don't think my parents should be paying for this.
Mm.
And he's like, yeah, you're right. I told my parents I didn't want guitar lessons anymore. They're like, why? And I had to make up a lie, being like I had outgrown them, and I felt like my musical, like I think I like said some really adult shit. I was like, I've outgrown this musically, and like I feel like my artistry is leading me elsewhere. And like, I think that another example of how I was like the perfect person to get in this kind of situation with, because I was already so eager to be, I wanted to be 25 like fucking yesterday.
Yeah.
I wanted my teenagerhood done. I wanted to have all the experiences. I was hungry for more experiences because I felt like it would make me more adult. And the more I dated an adult, the more I wanted to be more adult.
Yes.
To make it work.
Yeah.
So I called that part of the life off. And so it was just me sneaking off to be with him. And then prom. And prom was like a catalyst, because prom, I think, is when he started to realize what a fucking idiot he had been.
Interesting.
Because he like, you can't come over, because I was like, I want to come over after prom. And he's like, you can't come over after prom. Like, it's not a good idea. Stay with your friends or whatever. And I could start to see the cracks in all of this. Our time together was starting to feel really different. We were starting to spend less time together. He was more busy. I put that in parentheses.
Yeah.
Because I think he was starting to realize what a mistake he had made.
Totally.
And so he was on tour, and I was with one of my best friends growing up, and she and I hadn't connected in a while, and we were hanging out, and I started crying, and I was like, I have to tell you something. I was like, I have a secret. You can't tell anyone, but I need someone to know. And I told her, and she was like, that's fucking horrible. She was like, that's gross. And, the more I talked to her about it, finally having someone to talk to about it.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, what a scumbag. Like, ew. And so this was, I think, like at the end of the spring, early summer. And I called him, and he was I think he was in like San Diego playing a show at a bar or something. I don't know. And he stepped out to call me, and we talked for a second. I was like, I have to tell you something. I told my best friend about us. I'm so sorry. I know we had rules.
Yeah.
And he got really upset.
I know we had rules. Oh my God. Like that that in itself is like so gut-wrenching to me. I'm sorry.
Isn't it?
I know we had rules. Oh fuck.
Like coming back with the tail between my legs.
Yeah.
As if I had done something horrible by just telling someone in my life that this was happening. And he was upset. And then he got kind of soft about it. I was like, well, I understand where you're coming from. Like, this must be so hard on you. And that's the day we broke up on the phone. We never saw each other again in that time frame. I was like, look, I don't think I can lie to everyone in my life anymore. Because we were going to celebrate my 18th birthday together. And we had plans. And then we were going to be more public after my 18th birthday. We were going to go on like a real date. And it's so funny to think of now, because there was never that option.
Yeah.
You trick yourself into thinking there's that option. But what are you going to fucking tell people if you go on a real fucking date?
The day you turn 18. Yeah.
You go to dinner and like,
oh, it's so weird. We just ran into each other at the local Barnes and Noble, and we're going to go grab dinner.
Yeah. How'd you meet? Oh, we met yesterday.
Oh my God.
At, 8:45 in the morning. Exactly. Like, there was never a version of this that worked. But we both tricked ourselves. And again, let's come back to the age appropriate.
Yes.
We both tricked ourselves into believing there was a world in which this worked, but only one of us was doing that in an age appropriate way.
Yes.
We had talks about my 18th birthday. We talked about me going to college, and we hadn't come to an agreement about what that meant for us. I'm like, I'm definitely going to college, not in California. So what the fuck would happen then?
Yeah.
But that was, a year and a half away or something. It was a while away.
Mm-hmm.
We had all these plans, and, we'd go public and all this stuff. And, it could have never happened that way, right? Like, there was no world in which I could tell my parents this.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no universe that existed where he could tell his friends. And I think that started to hit me after I told my friend, after I finally confided in someone, where this whole universe we had made up, where this could become right if given enough time, if given the right kinds of boundaries.
Yeah.
Like, where we could finally be a real couple. it didn't exist because we weren't a real couple. So I broke up with him on the phone because I was like, I know that, you know, I'll be 18 in 5 months or something. I think it's like 5 months away. Like, I know I'll be 18 in 5 months and it's not that long. I'm like, but I can't lie for 5 more months. I'm like, I don't want to spend 5 more months trapped in lies. He's like, that makes total sense. You know, honestly, I think he was relieved that I was ending it.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think he wanted to try for another 5 months either. And so that's how I guess it ended. And afterwards, I kept making really bad decisions, and it took me like 8 years to understand why. You know, he was definitely not the first person that, like, I lost, I guess, the conventional virginity. I lost to a man in his 20s later that summer. I was, again, the side girl. I was a secret, and I remained I became the side girl in many relationships throughout my 20s. You know, intimacy and sex was never the way other people saw it. I no longer saw it as romantic. It was like a commodity to be traded. There were just so many things that were normal for me. Lies became very normal for me. Secrets became very normal for me. Like, and it's been something that I didn't even address until my later 20s or like mid 20s, like how much it affected me, how much it changed the world for me before I even had a world. And like, when we think about the nature of this kind of crime, that's really what it takes from you. Is like, you haven't even had a chance to set up your own bearings as to what relationships, sex, intimacy, friendships are. You've only accepted the truth that other people have given to you. You haven't made your own world yet. And so he set a standard for me to accept in the world I created after. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. Like, you know, like in Perks Being Wallflower, like, we accept the love we think we deserve. Like, that is kind of this situation. Like, I was given a structure for relationships that I therefore accepted as okay and repeated many times, not as the abuser, but repeated many times in terms of the secrets, the lies, because I accepted it, the less. So people had affairs with me throughout my 20s, secret lies, less. I had a really hard time asking for monogamy, for commitment, for labels. That was really hard for me. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together. It created distance between me and my parents because, you know, a year after the relation, you know, over a year after the relationship ended, I went to college across the fucking country, and I didn't call them as much. And there was a distance there. It took me a long time to understand that distance and why it was there. You know, and there were other things. I'm not saying this is the only thing.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
So when I was, I guess, almost 26, I told them. So that's almost 10 years after the fact, you know, or 9 years after the fact. I was like, this thing happened. And I'm sorry I never told you, but it's time. And I had my reasons for why it felt like time. But I can't tell you how it changed my relationship with my parents. We're so close. We've got such a healthy relationship now in a way we didn't before. And I realized that the secret had kept like this hold on me.
Totally.
Even after it ended.
Understandably, yeah.
Because there was a part of myself I couldn't share with my parents, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, it does.
And so, like, before I went on this podcast, I even called my parents and said, hey, I want to talk about this. What do you think? Like, the fact that we can do that.
100%, yeah.
And of course I didn't tell them. You know, like, they responded so well. They were like, we wish you had told us, but we get why you did it.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault. You know, and you didn't do anything wrong here. Like, you're not, all of this is because of him. Even the stuff that feels like it's because of you. And then they're like, what do you want to do about it? And I let the statute of limitations lapse and have yet to seek any sort of justice. And I still don't know how I feel about it, if I'm being real. I feel like I keep taking more and more steps to heal the wound. And I don't know if justice feels like it's going to heal the wound, but I also don't want anyone to go through what I went through.
For
so
sure.
I have a lot of conflicting feelings about it because he still lives in my town. He's still doing his thing. To my knowledge, he still teaches guitar lessons. Nothing has changed. And at least someone should really not be able to be a teacher who's had that behavior.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not okay because they obviously didn't respect the job enough and respect the people they were working with to have that job. So it's very difficult for me to make sense of how I feel around the justice system. And when the Me Too movement hit, it was really hard for me. I never posted a Me Too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I never, and I've talked to a lot of people who feel similarly.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think the Me Too movement, you know, it's great in a lot of ways. It's also super fucking triggering in a lot of ways, because you're suddenly seeing things that you've buried in other people's life stories that they're sharing. Mm-hmm. You see it everywhere. Like I had not experienced this level of like going on Instagram or going on Facebook and everybody's fucking talking about this thing I went through.
Yeah.
And sharing memes about it.
Yeah.
You know, when we think about the movement, and like I'm very supportive of the movement, it was jarring and incredibly challenging for me.
Yeah.
To suddenly exist in a world where everyone's fucking talking about this huge secret that I had, and like this incredibly long-term secret I kept. I mean, you could argue I was in the grooming period for 6 years. Mm-hmm. And then I kept the secret from my parents for like 8.5 more years. Mm. So that's like a lot of years.
Let me do some quick math. Yeah, that's a lot of fucking years.
Years.
Oh my God.
And like I'm suddenly confronted with seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, your whole BuzzFeed is all of these headlines, and like, you know, like I'm really glad I'm talking about it. I'm finally in a place in my life where I feel like I can.
Yeah, for sure.
For so many reasons. I feel like I can talk about it, and I feel like I need to talk about it because I'm starting to understand more of how it happened, why it happened, the red flags. You know, I think for so long I didn't talk about it because prior to the Me Too movement, it actually sort of felt very binary. If I talked about it to the wrong person, it becomes justice. If I told my parents, it becomes action.
Oh, interesting.
That I had to be ready for. It was much bigger.
Yeah. That makes sense.
It's gotten smaller over time. Like I know the statute of limitations lapsed. I could still do some things, but it is nice to talk about it knowing that it doesn't have to be today. I'm going to walk to the police station. Tell the police about some shit that happened.
Yeah.
14 years ago, whatever, 13 years ago.
Yeah, totally. I get that for sure. I get that absolutely.
And like my parents are angry, but they also recognize that it's mine.
Yeah.
My brother's angry, but recognizes it's mine. Like,
yeah.
And I'm starting the process of like, as I get closer to age to the perpetrator, how can I share my experience in a way that helps other people recognize the signs that this is happening? Because no one would have ever known it's happening because the secrecy it starts small and it gets bigger and bigger and incremental, right? Like the first secret isn't the relationship. The first secret was that we stopped learning about music.
Yeah. And like seemingly something that's like so innocuous and like so innocent. It's like, that's like such a small secret to start with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it starts with a little secret and it gets bigger and bigger.
It just snowballs. Yeah, absolutely.
Until the secret gets overwhelming. And that's, how the relationship broke. So when I was 21, I went and had a drink with him in my town. I wanted to know what it would feel like. And having a drink is a very adult rite of passage.
Yeah.
In a bar. And it was pretty creepy. He was still hitting on me, still interested, and who knows the complexities of that. Maybe there was a lot for him in terms of like needing to make it real, needing to make it have like, I'm 21, I'm now an adult. He's, I don't know, like 40. It was bizarre. So I had a drink with him and I didn't tell anyone in my life I was doing it. So there again, like the lie comes back.
Yeah.
Because it like builds on itself. And he was creepy and I felt sad for him. That was my honest experience. And he's never apologized or anything. He's reached out to me a couple of times, just like in music ways, like cool song or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is like beyond weird.
Yeah.
And it's a story that doesn't really have an end. The most I can hope for right now in my life is that the more I share it, the more people get education on how this happens. Like I don't think I'll have a kid, but if I ever did, if I ever had a teenager, I would want them to have a lot of information about like how adults can take advantage of them and what are the signs, because it starts so small.
Yeah.
You know, when you think about the story, it's such a small start to such a big story. Oh, we did it.
Man.
Isn't that crazy?
That's wild. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. Honestly, I cannot even really begin to imagine what that is like to experience. But in my very limited knowledge of people, I am glad to know it. I'm glad to hear you articulate that story in the way that you did, because I think it shows a tremendous emotional depth, and just being in even just how you have chosen to phrase things, and how you choose to how you view them now and how you think about them now. Like, I just think it shows a lot of depth in terms of like emotional maturity. And like, yeah, like I said, like I haven't experienced anything remotely like that. And so the context of what I'm able to emotionally process is very limited. But yeah,
you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for validating that this is actually about me. This is mine. No, just kidding. No, I just can't imagine, like, and again, like you said, it's just something that is just so much more common than we want to believe it to be, and it's a fucking shame, because it's like,
if
so
you ever
horrific.
want the, sorry to interrupt, but if you ever want to know the right way to handle if someone comes forward about this kind of thing, whether it be, you know, something like my experience or just something in the umbrella of assault, the only right thing for you to do is to let it be theirs.
I love that. I mean, I hate
Like,
that, but I love that. Yeah.
I understand that it's hard. It gives you a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, but it has to be theirs.
Yeah, 100%.
Because if my parents, like, after I told them, went to his house and like beat him up, it's really funny to imagine my parents like going to someone's house and beating them up. But if they did that, they're taking it away from me.
Yeah, I get that.
And the only thing I get to have now, because I don't have a time machine, is that I get to have who I tell it to, when I tell it, how I tell it.
It's yours. Yeah.
It's mine.
Yeah.
And if I want to walk into a police station and be like, this thing happened, and go through that process, that's mine too.
Yep.
If I want to reach out to other people and try to kind of, you know, and like last summer I made this big step and reached out to a couple people who I knew had mutual friends with him on Facebook, and didn't in any sort of shaming way, but just wanted to know if they had studied with him and if they had a similar experience. Not in a sense of like, block him, form a militia, like, let's start a Facebook group.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think that's like, really wish people would understand that it's ours. Like, when it happens to you, it's yours. You get to decide what you do with the information, because that's the way you reclaim power. That's the way you heal. It also took me many years to decide what I want to do with it. So yeah.
I love that. I that concept of let it be theirs, I think is poignant and brilliant. And I know the story doesn't have an ending, but like I think that's like the perfect like button at the end.
Yeah, I think so
like,
too.
Yeah, just let it be theirs. I love that.
Just let it. That's the best way to be an ally.
Yeah,
there are
100%.
a million ways to be an ally that you can still let it be the person who's confiding in you's story.
Yeah, for sure.
I will say, like, if this resonates with you, you know, reach out to me, DM me. We can have a conversation about it. I'm pretty, you know, at this point, like if I'm sharing on a podcast, like we can talk about it.
Yeah.
In my DMs.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'd love for someone to share with me their experience. And because that's like how we build community, and that's also how we learn about this particular problem.
Yeah, 100%.
So DM me.
I love that. Kat, thank you so much. This was so nice. Was so great.
This is so funny that our first
actual conversation
is like the most intense story of my life.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know, it's pretty on brand for us, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely is, and that's very on brand for me as well. Like I like to cut to the bone when I can. I'd rather know someone in reverse, like trauma first name later.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. Sincerely, you're the best, and I hope that we can actually hang out soon.
I would really like to do that once the surge is like
100%, yeah. Let's figure out what the next variant looks like, and then we'll figure out our plans.
Wait, what's the name of? Wait, can you name a transformer for me?
Optimus Prime.
Okay, that's the next variant.
Is it? Fuck no. I'm so glad I didn't say Megatron.
Because Omicron is like on variant.
Oh my god.
Sorry, they all sound like.
Yeah, they really
Other than the word COVID, they all sound like Transformers to me.
Oh man. All right, Kat.
This is my Omicron. Yeah.
That's amazing.
I'm glad I could give you a full belly chuckle on your way out.
Oh man. Oh, I appreciate it. I do. You're the best. Have a fantastic rest of your week and your weekend. I hope you have a great weekend. And yeah, I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, let's hang out.
Yes, please. I would love that.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Thank you, Kat, for being vulnerable and transparent and just willing to talk about this issue and your experience. If you or anyone you know are experiencing something like this, please seek help. I have some resources in the show notes of this episode, and Kat even offered to be a resource herself. If you want to follow Kat, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere you listen to music, just look up Kat Hamilton. Her songs are awesome, and she's an incredible artist. Follow her along on Instagram at Kat Hamilton Official. And if you want some extra time with Kat, head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/tellmeyours. I love Kat. She's wonderful to talk to. We had a great time chatting, so you get some extra time with her there. If you want to follow us, Twitter and Instagram, we are at tellmeyyourspod. Thank you again so much for listening, especially to this week's story. Again, thank you, Kat. It was so wonderful to connect and chat. Until next week,